What led the Pope to mention Donald Trump? Could it have been a prophetic vision, a divine revelation, or a warning about the future? These questions lie at the center of the investigation in this video, which analyzes the intriguing words of Pope John Paul I during his final days of life. Some revelations have the power to challenge our deepest beliefs, especially when they occur in moments of great silence and reflection in the final instance of his earthly journey. The Pope's words resonated beyond the walls of the Vatican, carrying messages that even today continue to provoke questions. Imagine the Vatican, a symbol of tradition and spirituality, immersed in an atmosphere of solemnity. Pope John Paul I, a leader of faith and resilience, spent his final days in a contemporary setting, remaining steadfast in his mission to guide humanity, even while weakened. His reflections deepened, and surprisingly, an unexpected figure emerged in his thoughts: Donald Trump. The final messages of Pope John Paul I revolved around the gospel and divine mercy. He frequently mentioned the episode of Thomas, the disciple who doubted Christ's resurrection until he saw the marks of the nails. For the Pope, that story symbolized God's infinite patience and his willingness to offer proofs of his grace, even in the face of doubt. However, one of the most enigmatic aspects of his final words was the reference to Trump. At that time, the businessman was known solely for his career in the world of business and entertainment, without any direct involvement in politics. Nevertheless, something about his figure caught the pontiff's attention, leading both the faithful and scholars to interpret that mention in various ways. Some believe that Pope John Paul I perceived in Trump traits that could significantly influence the global scene, while others maintain that the Pope had a prophetic vision about the political events that were about to occur. That mention generated debates, stimulating various analyses regarding the meaning of those words. To better understand the context in which these declarations were made, it is essential to go back in time and observe the global scenario of that period. On the 2nd of April of 2005, Pope John Paul I was deeply immersed in prayer and meditation. Despite facing intense pains, his attention remained focused on humanity. His final messages, filled with spiritual teachings, were only fully understood after his passing, consolidating a legacy that continues to inspire reflection in the Vatican. Surrounded by his closest assistants, he dedicated his final days to writing, leaving guidelines and warnings for the world. Many of those records remained unpublished until after his death, revealing his concern about the moral and spiritual challenges of modern society. The devotion of Pope John Paul I was evident in every aspect of his life, but it intensified even more in his final moments. He saw suffering not as a burden, but as a means to connect more deeply with Christ. In his prayers, he asked for strength and wisdom, not for himself, but for those who would remain at the forefront of the Church and face the challenges of the world. The Pope warned about the advance of secularism and moral relativism, which, according to him, threatened the spiritual foundation of humanity. In his final words, he emphasized the need to trust in God's mercy and the importance of resisting the temptations of materialism. He called on the faithful to return to prayer, to assume active roles in the defense of the faith, and to cultivate justice and kindness. Among his most impactful reflections, he anticipated a period of intense spiritual battle in which the followers of the faith would have to demonstrate resilience. His final message was not merely a warning, but a call to hope, even in the face of adversity. Divine mercy would be the path toward true peace. Pope John Paul I emphasized that, in a world fragmented and plagued by conflicts, forgiveness and reconciliation were essential for unity. He used the gospel story of Thomas to illustrate the challenge of faith in the modern world, showing that just as Christ offered proofs of his resurrection, God continues to give us signs of his presence. But what do these words mean for us today? Why did the Pope mention Trump amid such profound teachings? And how can we interpret his reflections in a world that still faces uncertainties and divisions? These are questions that still resonate, inviting us to look to the past in search of answers for the present. In the final moments of his life, Pope John Paul I repeated with fervor, "Jesus, in you I trust. You have us and the whole world." That phrase, simple yet full of meaning, summed up his belief in God's redeeming mercy and expressed his plea for humanity in times of suffering and sin. As his health deteriorated, his thoughts turned increasingly toward the future. He envisioned a world facing unprecedented spiritual and moral challenges, foreseeing a growth in the influence of evil and the need for Christians to remain alert and steadfast. He warned that, as humanity advanced in technology and economy, there would also be an increase in spiritual complacency and a gradual loss of moral values. Despite these warnings, his message was one of hope. Pope John Paul I believed that with faith, prayer, and obedience to divine commandments, humanity would be capable of overcoming such trials. In his final moments, when he no longer had the strength to speak, he continued praying in silence, reflecting on the redemption of the world and the strength needed for the faithful to resist temptations. His unwavering dedication and his love for humanity shone through in every prayer and every reflection. Among his final meditations, the Pope found comfort and inspiration in the Gospel of John, where the risen Christ appears to the apostles and shows them the marks of the nails in his hands. For him, that scene symbolized the essence of divine love and mercy, a teaching he wished to leave as his legacy. That appearance occurs 8 days after the resurrection, when Jesus appears to the disciples gathered in a closed room, overcome by fear and uncertainty. Thomas, who was absent during the first appearance, doubted the testimony of the other disciples and stated that he would only believe if he could see and touch Christ's wounds. When Jesus returned and invited him to touch his scars, Thomas abandoned his disbelief and proclaimed, "My Lord and my God." The meaning of this account transcends the event itself. It teaches that true faith does not depend on visible proofs, as reinforced by the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 7, "For we walk by faith and not by sight." For 35 years, the disciples were physically with Jesus, but the time came to learn to trust in his spiritual presence. Thomas's doubt reflects the search for concrete evidence, something common even in our days. Initially, Thomas demanded proofs to believe in the resurrection. However, when Jesus invited him to touch his wounds, the need for evidence vanished, and he recognized the divinity of Christ without hesitation. Nevertheless, Jesus emphasized that faith goes beyond what can be seen. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. With these words, Christ blessed those who believe without needing tangible signs, highlighting a deeper and more authentic faith. Pope John Paul I saw in that lesson a fundamental principle for the Church in modern times. For him, genuine faith was not based on physical proofs, but on complete trust in God's mercy and love. Thomas's transformation symbolized the path he wished all Christians would follow, especially in a world that is increasingly skeptical and uncertain. His teaching was clear: the resurrection of Christ is the source of hope and redemption, even in the darkest moments. Reflecting on this gospel story, the Pope emphasized the need for unwavering faith in a world marked by doubt. He recognized that Thomas's disbelief resonated with contemporary uncertainties, reinforcing the importance of a personal encounter with Christ, even without his physical presence. His message was a call to humanity to accept the redemption offered by the gospel and to trust in Christ's constant presence in their lives. The final words and thoughts of Pope John Paul I became a lasting spiritual legacy, inspiring generations to strengthen their faith. But amid these profound reflections, an unexpected element emerged: a mention of Donald Trump. At the time of the Pope's death in 2005, Trump was widely recognized as a business magnate and a television personality, still far from the political role he would later assume. However, among the Pope's observations, there were enigmatic references to him, suggesting that he would play a relevant role. Pope John Paul I's words about Trump were recorded in a vague manner, yet laden with meaning. He mentioned the businessman in the context of future global events, insinuating that he would occupy a position of great influence and have a determining impact on the course of history. That posthumous revelation generated debates and speculations. What was it that he saw in the businessman that justified such a mention? Those questions remain open, inviting us to interpret the possible hidden meanings in the Pope's final words. To understand what led Pope John Paul II to mention Donald Trump, it is essential to consider the role of prophecies and the responsibility of spiritual leaders in interpreting divine messages. Known for his deep spirituality and his ability to discern God's will, Pope John Paul I conveyed reflections that went beyond the immediate. Thus, his references to Trump must be analyzed under the lens of spiritual discernment and the prophetic vision in the Catholic tradition. Prophecy often reveals events that reflect divine designs and warnings. Therefore, the Pope's observations about Trump can be interpreted as an inspired vision, anticipating future events. Pope John Paul I did not refer to Trump solely as an individual, but to the potential impact that his rise would have on the global stage. His reflections suggested that Trump would play a role of great relevance, influencing not only politics, but also cultural and spiritual aspects of society. He foresaw a period of significant transformations, in which Trump's actions would serve as catalysts for changes that were both positive and challenging. That duality is common in prophetic messages, reflecting the complexity of human free will and divine providence. After the Pope's death, Trump's ascent to the presidency of the United States confirmed the prediction of drastic changes. His administration generated profound impacts both domestically and on the global stage. To understand his role in history, a balanced analysis is necessary, one that takes into account both his achievements and the controversies that marked his government. His supporters highlight advances such as the strengthening of national security, economic growth, and his defiant stance against the political establishment. On the other hand, his critics point to the polarizing nature of his policies, his inflammatory rhetoric, and the ethical issues associated with his administration. From a prophetic perspective, Trump's government can be seen as the fulfillment of Pope John Paul I's predictions, bringing profound changes and spurring fundamental debates. His decisions had repercussions in various spheres of society, provoking both progress and challenges. Regardless of opinions for or against him, it is undeniable that his figure marked the course of world events. Trump's presidency left an indelible mark on American and international politics, and the intense reactions generated by his actions underscored the need for deep reflection on moral and ethical values in politics. This aspect resonates with the prophetic visions of Pope John Paul I, who emphasized the duality of historical impacts and the importance of discernment in times of transformation. One fundamental element of his administration was his relationship with religious communities. Trump secured the support of various groups that saw in his policies a defense of their principles and beliefs. This factor may have been considered by Pope John Paul I in his visions, as he always underscored the need to preserve spiritual values in challenging times. His call to mercy and love served as a guide, encouraging the faithful to maintain their faith and compassion regardless of circumstances. The Pope's message about divine mercy is a prism through which one can analyze Trump's impact from a spiritual perspective. His mention of the businessman was not limited to the political sphere, but served as a reminder of the need for moral and spiritual reflection. If you like this analysis, do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this.